we're going to go over what it's like to shot take. And spoiler alert, it's a really big shot. Before we get into today's video, some important things that I want to mention. One is I'll be out during the WSOP. If you guys ever see me, just come say hi. It's honestly a pleasure. WSOP can get kind of lonely, so seeing some friendly faces kind of goes a long way in keeping us sane. We're hopping into Mariano's 5100 game that ends up having a $200 straddle pretty consistently, and then a $400 massive shot take, by far and away the biggest stakes I've ever played in my whole life. So without further ado, let's hop into that session. Shot taking 101. Lesson 1. How to end up in a massive pot in a game you're shot taking in. This very first hand, we're playing a PLO double board bomb pot. If you guys aren't familiar, I can give you guys a quick 101 dummies on the PLO bomb pot. Emphasis on the dummy being me. You get 4 cards, you play PLO. There's 2 boards. Each board represents half the pot. You can get quartered in this game. It's pretty silly to be quite frank, so you gotta be careful. Luckily in this game, there's a 5K cap, meaning there's no more than $5,000 allowed to be put in by each player going to the flop. We've got some catching up to do. I have ace 10, king 6, and the flops come out 9, 5, 3, and ace queen 9. We flop ourselves a little bit on one board and not so much of it on the other, but I do have myself the nut flush draw, and when Mike X decides to lead out for 1200, I've got nothing to do here besides at least make the call. Nate Hill calls from behind us. We're 1 3-ways off to a turn card that improves us immediately, as it gives us a pair on one board, which is not worth a lot, but on the other board we end up with the beautiful nuts, as well as 2 pair to boot. At this point, Mike X decides to put in the rest of the money for 3,800, which is the cap. I go ahead and make the call, and Nate Hill behind thinks about it for a bit, hems and haws, before deciding to make the call himself. We're going off to the river, hoping for the board not to pair. And on the top board, it ends up coming a 4 of clubs. Doesn't change much for me. And on the top board, we end up with the 3rd nuts as the board pairs in a good way, as we now have 10s full of aces with ace 10. Unfortunately for us, we are absolutely destroyed when Mike X shows a straight on the top board and Nate shows pocket queens on the bottom board for a better boat. Unfortunate is the least that I can possibly say here, but hey, as it goes, PLO for dummies. Probably don't learn much from this teacher. To be quite frank, I'm still kind of in a bit of a mumble jumble. My head's everywhere right now. I'm spinning. I just lost half my stack and pretty much like 30 or 40% of the money that I came to the casino with. I top up to get as close as I can to 9,000 here. And here I am battling once again with not much money. When Mike X decides to open a 300, I'm in later position here and I look down at ace queen. I go in 3-bet to 1,000, feels like it's a mandatory spot to do so. At this point, Mike decides to call. The flop comes out jack high. Not really good for me. Probably better for him here. He's going to have all the straight draws as well as the sets. When he checks it over to me, I do decide to throw out a down bet here for 800. This can do several things, most of which is denying equity and getting hands to fold. We can take the pot down here with ace high. That's never bad. Unfortunately for me, Mike S has different plans when he decides to call. The turn card doesn't change much as it comes at 3 of hearts, and when the action checks to me, on a card like this, my opponent's never going to be folding any jacks here as there's no scare cards. Feels like a pretty easy spot to just go ahead and give up here. We're going off to a river card that comes out the 10 of diamonds. I do block some straights, but to be quite frank, I think most of the hands that I'm going to be worried about are going to be hands like 10-8 suited, Jack-8 suited, Jack-10 suited. All those hands are going to be betting here, which they do, which is for 2,000. I decide against it and just decide to make the fold. Good hand, Mike. So far, we are 0 for 2, and that's not how you get into the big leagues. Luckily for us, there's a $200 straddle on, and under the gun is where Nate is, and he decides to rate to 500. Action folds to me on the button, and we look down at a suited king 8 of spades. I think this is a pretty reasonable spot to go ahead and throw in a little call here. I'm playing a little on the shorter side now. I only have like somewhere in the neighborhood of 6,000 or 7,000 in front of me. But hey, c'est la vie. I make the call. We're going heads up to a flop that's pretty good as it comes king 6-3 with 2 clubs. Flush draw out there. Nate bets for 400. I think doing something a little goofy here is reasonable. I decide to go ahead and raise. A couple reasons, most of which being my hand's okay and I can get a free check card on the turn. If our opponent calls, which he does, and the turn card comes an ace, and he checks, and it looks like it's going to plan here, I think about it for a bit. I don't really consider my opponent to be floating with any ace highs that don't contain the ace of clubs, but to be fair, quite a bit of his floats, or not floats, but continues, are going to have the ace. So I go ahead and think better of it and decide to check it back. Working off to a river card, that comes bink, king of hearts. He checks to me, and now we have about 4.2k behind. This pot is ballooning up pretty quickly, and the only question is, how much money can I get in the middle? After a bit of thinking, I realize that if my opponent has an ace, I don't think it matters what sizing I go with. I don't need to go down some kind of GTO Superstar mathematics randomizer solver based to prove nonsense. I've got a good hand, and it's honestly relatively disguised for how odd I played it, so I think going all in is the play for me to go with. I jam it all. Our opponent thinks about it for a bit before deciding to fold. Unfortunate to not get any more value there, but granted, as odd as I played it, as unfavorable as that turn card is, happy to take the pot down nonetheless. Unfortunate for us, this session's going to continue going whether I like it or not, so I've got to strap in and really hunker down. In this next pot, I find myself in middle position with pocket sevens. I raise. The button and the big blind make the call here. It's incredible to think that I'm raising the size of the max blind for a 2-3 game here in Los Angeles, but whew, reality is definitely striking. The flop comes out what looks pretty reasonable for me, as it comes ace high. Definitely going to favor me, but what I'm going to tell you something now is you don't want to be in multi-way pots just blasting off into the ether, which is what I do. I bet pretty big here for 600 going 2/3. I think a smaller bet does the same thing. I'm just betting my range here, like whatever the hell that even means. The button decides to make the call. We're going off to a turn card that comes at 6. Close enough to a 7, but you know what they say in poker. Close is not that close after all. At this point, I check over to my opponent, who decides to bet for 1,500. And obviously, this is a pretty easy fold. But the reason I bring this hand up is I think that this is just not the same game. I can't be attacking it like I would some random 2-5 or 5-10 game. I've got to really lock in here and take advantage of my situations when they're given to me and play as good as I possibly can. In this hand, I think a smaller c-bet would have been fine. I also think just checking and giving up is fine as well. I'm in middle position and I raise with queen 8 of hearts. When the big blind calls and the flop comes out jack 7-4. As opposed to the last hand where I think we got a little carried away, this is a good hand to c-bet. One, it's kind of a dry flop and we can kind of bet somewhere around half pot or a little less. That, coupled with the fact that, hey, we actually have some backdoor equity here. Different straight draws can come out for me, and obviously that flush draw that we're looking at, as well as a queen probably gives us the best hand as well. This is a much better spot to c-bet, not with 3 over cards to my middling pair. I throw out a bet here for 400, somewhere in the neighborhood of half pot. Look at that, we get a fold. Now we're talking. Let's win some poker hands, huh? By this point, our stack is starting to dwindle. These blinds are really big, so when they go around, it can get pretty crazy. That, coupled with the fact that the $400 straddle has been going on for a couple of orbits, and in this next hand, it is on once again. The action folds to me in the small blind, and with $6,400, I looked down at queen 9 of clubs, and I think that raising here is okay. Like, what do I even raise it to? Like, a third of my stack and try to fold if I get jammed on? How about no? I do some good old-fashioned tournament poker play and just decide to rip in my 15 big blinds somehow. $6,400 is not that much, I guess, all in. If we get called, I mean, so be it. At least our hand's not that bad. But to be quite honest, taking down what is like more than 15% of my stack pre-flop is probably not all that bad either. That, coupled with the fact that we can still get called by worse, or at least hands that we're running up against that I think we can outrace, 7s, 8s, 6s. All those hands are definitely going to call, as both of my opponents are sitting on over $100,000. Either way, Mariano looks down at ace 5 and asks if I want action. The one thing I learned here is keep my mouth damn shut. Don't pry it open. Don't give him anything away. He decides to fold, which is great, as we don't want to get called by ace high, to be quite honest. And luckily for us, the action ends up on Ethan. He peels a deuce first, followed by an ace. Thinks about it for a quick second before eventually deciding on a fold. In this case, I actually didn't mind a call, whether I was even flip or not. Seeing that one of the aces was folded, seeing that one of the straight cards was folded for him, I would have been okay with the race. But either way, we take down nearly like $1,000 pre-flop, and we'll definitely take it. I'm just a sucker for a suited hand.
flat out. Lin decides to open it up to 300. I'm in middle position. I look down at said suited hand. I go ahead and make the call here with my king. We're going heads up to a flop that comes jack 6-3. At this point, my opponent decides to throw out a bit of a larger c-bet for 500, a little more than half pot. I think about it for a second and realize that there's a small chance that I can float here and use my tight image to hopefully benefit me and maybe steal it away on a later street. We can also pick up some backdoor equity, so we go and throw a little float out here. And we're going off to a turn card that comes a deuce of hearts. Yeah, not what we're looking for. The front door flush completes. We don't pick up any more equity, and my opponent's checking. Well, to be quite honest, I'm in between a rock and a hard place. We can start bluffing, but that means I'm going to have to get my stack in the middle by the end. Or I can check and somehow catch a miracle king on the river. The river card does come in fact the heart, as it's the 9 of hearts. And my opponent does not seem to love that when she decides to check. I bet 600, going really small. My opponent goes deep into the tank. Lin is not happy to get bluffed here. And eventually she decides on a call. We flip over our hand, proud to show our king high. And she shows king jack with no heart. So great call by her. But she will later on tell me that there was no other bet that she was going to even think about, consider. She would have snap called. She would have felt like it was a bluff. And she thought that my sizing being so small looked so odd and made her more likely to consider folding. All that to be said, she didn't fold anyway, so who the hell cares? Our final hand of the day is definitely one we got to go over when there's yet another $200 straddle on. My stack has still been hovering around 6,000 to 8,000, which is not good for many blinds, but here we are battling away. I decide to raise it up from the small blind with ace deuce off to 800. Ethan, who's in the double straddle, will not be allowing that to just go so easily with the raise and take, so he defends. Mr. Rampage decides to check the flop over to me. That comes queen at queen 9. Not a super great board, but it is fairly dry. There is some straight draws out there, but on a board that is this static, I'm going to go ahead and throw out a small c-bet for 400. Ethan thinks about it for a bit and decides to call. Like my little quarter down bet, little goofy bet, but here we are going to a turn that comes a 4 spades. Doesn't change a whole lot here, and I think I can start cranking up a little bit of pressure by betting a little bit on the larger side now. When he checks to me, I decide to throw out a bet of 1,000. Ethan's not having it. He decides to make the call. And the river card is one of my least favorite cards in the deck, as it comes a 10 of clubs. Now his hands that had straight draws probably improved to pairs or improved to actual straights. So when he checks it over to me, I snap check it back, and he does show jack 10. Very unfortunate for us there. I like where our head was at, but obviously not the best bluff in the world. But hey, we were getting value. We put money in the middle when we were ahead, and we checked it back when we were behind. So that's going to wrap up today's session. I want to talk to you guys a little more about shot taking and all of that, and my thoughts on it at the conclusion of the video, as well as to tell you what I was in and out for. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to like the video, and let's start over me now.
It's really unfortunate when you take these shots and things don't pan out in your favor. Look, you can't win every single session that you hop into. I mean, if you could, you'd probably be Mike Postle, but I'm not. A couple of pointers and things that I want to talk about relevant to shot taking, which I think are kind of important, is do it when the game is good. And luckily for us, we were lucky enough to hop into Mariano's game, which is obviously massive. Huge thanks to him, by the way. The action's crazy. Me coming in there and splashing around is obviously gonna be good. Whatever the biggest game of your casino is, if it's good and you're running good and you've been good and you feel like you're on top of your game, just the hell with it. Just go for it. Understands the trials and tribulations that come with it. It's not gonna always, as you guys just saw, be roses and freaking rainbows. You're gonna get whacked sometimes, and I had one of the biggest losses this entire year for me, which sucks, as we've been kind of on a little bit of a downer lately. But hey, when the opportunity presents itself and the opportunity is good, sometimes you gotta grab it by the balls and just go for it. Make sure you're in the right mental space. It's probably more beneficial for you to shot take after being on a little bit of an upswing than doing it at the stone bottom of a downswing. I mean, I guess that's a given. Have fun with it. The core of poker is supposed to be a fun game. When you go out there, make sure that you're willing to battle and willing to have some fun. Don't be some Nick grinder that just comes in and stays quiet and puts their hand on their shoulder and has headphones in and it's got sunglasses and a hoodie on, because you just look like a narc. And to be quite honest, even the action players, they're not stupid. They see you're a grinder from a mile away and they won't give you any damn action. That's just the flat out truth. Be somebody that's approachable. I promise you'll go a long way when you're doing this kind of stuff. All that to be said, I don't got a whole lot more to preach y'all up with, so I'll leave you guys with this. I was into the game for 13,000 and out for 5,000, which is an $8,000 loss, which definitely stings a lot. You live and you learn. I think I learned a little bit this session. I took a shot, and if I'm being quite honest, I don't think I was totally ready for it, considering I didn't get to play that long. The game ended up breaking about an hour and a half or an hour and 45 minutes into me playing it, and that's the reason we don't have too many hands to go over. So I just wasn't able to catch my wind, if you know what I'm saying. Don't force anything. If the opportunity presents itself, go for it and have some fun. Outside of that, I'll see you guys at the WSOP. Maybe be selling some action if I haven't already done so already. I'll see you guys on the virtual felt on the Splash Squads. I live stream that every Sunday. I'll see you guys at the Lucky Lady in the private games or the games on Sunday, 1 p.m. See you guys there. Love you all dearly. Enjoy your night. I got a great idea. Look at this. A little impromptu. Hopefully some of you guys, I want some of you guys to go take that shot at a good game. A good game. Don't just pick some weird game that's grinder infested. Take a shot at a good game and let me know how it goes. Have a wonderful day. See you guys next time.
I can do this with my eyes closed.